Hi,
We
everyone.
hope, hi everyone. Um, we hope you and your communities are feeling safe after a very taxing first week of the new year. It's been challenging around health and racial pandemics at the same time. We're really witnessing a lot of economic and social struggle.
We'd like to acknowledge the Native communities and nations on whose ancestral lands we are occupying. We recognize the Nacashtank, the Anacostan, and the Piscataway people. We offer our respect to the elders and the past, current, and future members of these nations. We acknowledge the lives and experiences and the contributions of the African and African American communities whose forced displacement enabled the building of American University. Thank you to Dr. Fanta Al, the American University Influence of Slavery Working Group, and Nicholas Mack, who while a junior in SPA and SIS, and while he was the managing editor for the opinion of the Eagle, initiated this valuable research.
Decolonization is the work to repatriate land to members of First Nations, and through this process, work to address generational harm and trauma, and address systems of community and cultural violence.
The practice of decolonization overlaps with historical oppressive structures of racism and xenophobia that manifests in all parts of the American experience. Decolonial solidarities between indigenous communities, colonized and oppressed peoples means this, that the investment in the liberation of others guarantees your own freedom. And please read the Combahee River Collective to learn more.
As Eve Tuck and Kay Wayne Yang articulate in their influential essay, Decolonization is Not a Metaphor, decentering settler perspectives and ideologies does not lead to repatriation of indigenous land and life. That's just where the work begins. Through our respective roles and in our overlapping communities, we continue to do the work of abolitionism, equity work, and sovereignty. And I'll put this reading that I mentioned in the chat as well.
Importantly, we work towards joy as resistance, safety, and collective freedom, especially for our beloveds who experience the most intersections of oppressive, systemic, and discriminatory policies.
As Syndicate, we're a member of Common Field, which is a large network of artist-run projects in the United States. I think there are probably around 400 to 500 organizations. One of the practices of Common Field is to acknowledge the people and the land in which we occupy. We encourage everyone to acknowledge the history of the land they occupy in the chat.
And we'd like to start off with this video, and I'm going to put the text of the closed captioning in the chat. We ran into some snafus with transcribing everything.
I'm going to talk to you about Sindikit. I know that's the Ibanasai Syndicate. It's something that Tim and Zoe made up. It's, you know, I think it's because of all the crazy things that have been happening in Baltimore. That's not the point. Syndicate is this progressive place where you can do all kinds of I'm trying to make sure my eyes look great. All kinds of really fabulous experimental. You're trying to do things that maybe you haven't done before or that you would be hard pressed to show anybody.
We are here to talk about our co-working relationship and our collaboration as the Syndicate Project. Our project evolved from our working relationship at American University.
The genesis of the Syndicate Project stems from our agreement and an actual handshake to be good colleagues, which then eventually led to being collaborators. And when we say collaborators, we're talking about a very layered collaborative relationship. Our goals in the presentation are to show the ways that creative scholarship of artists can be put to work. So we bullet pointed them. So through this talk today, we encourage you to recognize the relationship between an artist's work and their identities and positionalities. Explore pedagogical initiatives like ours. There's a larger ecosystem of pedagogical projects and artists' creative scholarship that can act as models. It's important to us to reference and cite other people's creative pedagogical projects when we teach. And last, creative research and pedagogy can be incorporated into non-art courses.
Tim and I have been colleagues since 2003.
The genesis, oh, we already said that. In 2016, when we established Syndicate, we decided to make a project and work directly with artists. And this project gave us a lot of freedom outside of the university, where we would face administrative challenges that many of you are probably very familiar with when programming in academic spaces.
We wanted to continue working both in and out of the university and use our own resources and leverage university support for artists and programming that extended beyond the boundaries of AU to better connect students with community.
Syndicate grew from our shared values. And yes, we list our values. You can look on our website. We wanted to make space for undervoiced artists with content and conversations that weren't regularly experienced at our home institution. At AU, we were originally working in a curriculum that was meant for a different generation of artists with a different demographic. The changes we wanted to implement reflect the changing demographic at AU, which does reflect our ethos, and this changing demographic demanded that we really reconsider our program's curriculum.
We became collaborators out of circumstance and then by choice. We worked together as teachers, as administrators, as community builders, curators, studio mates, artists, and now editors.
And importantly, Syndicate stems from our shared philosophy to make space for underrepresented artists and cultural producers and to absolutely privileged research. So this, where are we? Okay, this is where we started. This is Nebraska Hall, which is now dorms. We both came to the university with the promise of the other building, which opened in our second year at AU.
This is the work we were making when we were hired at AU to work, and we were hired to work specifically with undergraduates in drawing and painting and mentor graduate students. Now, the content of our individual work, for Tim, it was performing identity and gender, and for me, critiquing race and gender, added missing perspectives within the curriculum. And our identities and our work introduced nuanced conversations around figuration. Surprisingly, we don't teach figure drawing or painting because we were and still are interested in other ways of art making.
So we met each other with interest, and this is an indication of overlaps that can happen between artists. We just happen to be using the same kinds of props. All sorts of things can happen when you decide to be a supportive artist and colleague. You often find common ground, whether you're looking or not. These images give you a sense of where we were at that time. We are a part of several overlapping communities. And for our students, our colleagues, ourselves, when we came to this university, we really knew that we needed to make friends with everyone in and outside of the university community. So we started inviting collaboration, and pictured here is a substantial collaboration with the organization called Transformer. And Transformer connected us with Elsewhere, which is a living museum in North Carolina, Design Studio for Social Intervention, and the Hirshhorn Museum within a single program.
I was a student, I was an artist in residence, and I'm always a student, at the Hirshhorn Museum. And after that residency ended, we used that opportunity as a cultivation moment. Milena Kalinovska, who was then the director of engagement at the Hirshhorn, who is now the director at the National Gallery in Prague, was receptive to collaborate and share visiting artists.
And once we knew that we could make these kinds of relationships, we developed relationships with the Hamiltonian Fellowship as mentors, the Phillips Collection, Howard University, where we both acted as on critique panels, George Washington University, where we're very close with their faculty, the National Museum of African Art, Museum of Contemporary Art in Baltimore, recently this summer, actually, the Baltimore Museum of Art, and coming up in the fall, the National Gallery of Art. These relationships have allowed us to use the university's resources impactfully. For instance, our first collaboration with the Hirshhorn allowed us to bring Marina Abramovic onto campus. and many of you may have heard of her. She is a performance artist. I think she was the first performance artist to have a solo show at the Museum of Modern Art. The name of that exhibition was called The Artist is Present.
We've seen successful models of what can happen in and outside of academia. And here are some examples of that. There's the Hyde Park Art Center, the Creative Alliance, the Marie Walsh Sharp, Skowhegan, Creative Alliance, the Contemporary Art Center, Jennifer Chenoweth with Generous Art in Austin, Texas, and Chela, which turned into the Transmodern Festival in Baltimore, Maryland. We wanted to emphasize to the students that we work with that working in isolation is not the way of the art world. Collaboration, community, and collegiality go hand in hand to building successful practices and art lives.
As much as we were bringing people into the institution, visiting artists, in addition to the organizations we were working with and curators, we knew that it was very important to get out. So we made it a part of our curriculum. An early visiting artist series, which we collaborated on, was called Inside Out, and it had really long-term impact on our program, which meant we brought institutions in with purpose and our students out. So we introduced our students to big institutions, to small artist-run institutions or projects, and we worked regionally. So we were bringing students to New York, Baltimore, and Philly routinely. And when we made these trips, we lined up studio visits, we met with alumni that had active studio practices, and yeah, engaged pretty broadly.
Yeah, building community extended into our teaching. We wanted to team teach, but we had no real infrastructure to do this, so we just did it ourselves. So we simply scheduled ourselves to teach at the same time.
And then we put our collaborative relationship on display in the classroom.
Yeah, students came to appreciate something that was really important to us, mentoring each other, learning from your peers. There aren't many opportunities to build tight communities between cohorts. So especially with the structure of our program with first years and second year MFA candidates within different classroom settings. And so what this did is it met a need.
We are ambitious with our students. So, and many of our students are here, so they know that's true because we harass them. We want to just show you a few examples. And the one thing that we share is an impulse to stick our nose into everything. So we definitely keep up with our students. This is Michael Dodson on the left, who now works in New York, and he's really doing pretty well with his gallery career. And on the right is Lauren Rice, who just got tenure at a college in Virginia.
Yeah, and Brian Barr is on the left with the panels and the painting. And on the right at the bottom is Kate Sable. And so the support of our students outside of the classroom is pretty extensive. We do this through different kinds of mentorship models, through exhibitions, through continued studio visits and engagement, through mentorship for job and teaching positions, and the purchase of artwork. We do this together as syndicates. So we have a small syndicate collection.
Which is getting bigger. These are images by two artists that were working or that were studying at AU in our first couple of years. And in time, we've really seen our artists do very well. So on the left is Julia Rommel's work. And Julia has had her first job with one of our visiting artists in New York, and his name is Donald Moffat.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she was a studio assistant, which really got her on the ground and running. And now she's represented by Bureau in New York and Standard in Oslo, and she has a pretty international career. On the right is Allison Hall, who was very young when we met her. And Allison over time has started working with galleries in New York and Bonn and Berlin. Now, I'm talking about galleries because that is an indication of an artist's success, but you're seeing artists that have been working for quite a while. And we're not a kind of program that expects or pushes for immediate success. We're really invested in lifelong art practices. We mentor, as Zoe mentioned, particularly around teaching, and we stay in touch.
With our students and our adjuncts.
Yeah.
This is an example of Guy Miller's work. He graduated in 2018. And in this exhibition, this was his thesis exhibition, he featured the posters of highlighted the African-American superheroes from the 90s. And this is Meteor Man. And if you guys remember that, Robert Townsend, who is an amazing actor, ended up contacting Guy via Instagram to say thank you so much for giving me mad props for this movie.
This is an installation at the Katzen Art Center, and this is one of our students, Corey Orbendorfer, who has a pretty substantial regional career. And we show this slide because it really conveys the ambition of our students. Corey did multiple projects in the Katzen Art Center that used the entire space.
And this is Shannon Young. Shannon graduated from AU in 2004. I think 2004. And after she finished at AU, she ended up going to UMBC to receive her second MFA in imaging and digital arts. And her work expanded into performance, video theory, and new media studies. And then after she graduated from UMBC, she spent a few years making impactful advocacy-based work, ecofeminist work that looked at land and food production through durational performances. And in 2013, she moved to Melbourne, Australia, and decided to pursue a PhD at La Trobe University in media, screen, and sound. And we are so proud that she is now Dr. Shannon Young as of December 2020.
And we couldn't keep our nose away from her either, because we ended up serving on her committee when she got her PhD. Mm-hmm. So we're doing a kind of big setup here for the work that we do with Syndicate. And that work is work that we promoted before we actually did. And this is a project called Delicious Spectacle that was a curatorial project that was organized by 4 of our grad students, and they decided to riff on the Society of the Spectacle, which they always read in my theory class. And they made this project not as a vanity project, which is a project that is meant to just promote oneself, but as a curatorial project that they could use to really explore the greater art world, to operate out of curiosity. And they really put themselves into the contemporary art world by engaging as curators. Yeah. And in that way, they really profited. But this project was a 2-year project. It was in the living room of one of our adjunct professors, Isabel Manolo. And by the time the project was through, they committed to 2 years. By the time it was done, they were routinely reviewed in the Washington Post.
With CAS and with the support of Dean Peter Starr, built out studios for the studio art faculty. And we know this is a huge investment on the university's part, especially for an R2 university. These studios actually transformed our relationship as artists with each other through proximity. We give feedback to each other about works in progress, and what we always emphasize is that making community is the most valuable asset. Building community is a valuable asset.
It's also great to have someone to show all your stuff to.
Yeah, right. I bug you all the time. So we don't actually have time to delve into our respective work, but please visit our websites to gain an understanding of what we do. We're going to quickly show you some of the kinds of work that we did when during our first 5 or so years at AU. And this way you get to see the kind of scale and the scope of the figurative work we were doing. So as a collaborative pursuit, Syndicate combines our mutual interests in facilitating creative engagements, mining our shared resources, and sharing our enthusiasms about what artists do, how they think.
And what they do.
Yeah, what they do.
The Syndicate project is loosely influenced by The 5 Obstructions, which is a film by Lars von Trier. And von Trier, in this film, invited another filmmaker to remake one of his films 5 times, placing a different set of obstructions on each iteration. We have done something similar. We founded Syndicate to give artists an opportunity to work outside of their general practices and to really embrace research, but we can give people a problem if they don't have one.
That's right. So our collaboration functions as a research space for us, and we hope the invited artists. In our primary practices, we are both known for our figurative work, and different circumstances have allowed us to work outside of our general practices. Tim started making abstractions or paintings that looked like abstractions.
And Zoe started showing her animations and making large-scale installations with stickers. And she used many materials that are really related to craft. And then I wrapped a really giant building.
And I made a huge mosaic.
So the places where our interest in our studios or in our research connect is the foundation of the Syndicate project. Gender, sexuality, race, and the economy of things.
As well as identity, consumerism, and commodity culture, tokenism, and appropriation. So syndicate artists work with ideas, processes, or materials that are important in our respective processes and practices. And in a sense, these artists give us a way to examine our own ideas through a different kind of lens. And these artists require that we re-examine our own practices, our motivations, and our interests. And this is actually the foundation of a graduate course that I teach called Research Practicum, where we consider the methodologies of other artists as possible guideposts to solve independent studio challenges. We consider the histories and the traditions in which we belong and broaden or just better understand the context of our work. Now, it's important for us to say that Syndicate is a self-funded, non-commercial venture. However, the 2016 and 2017 cycle of the project was partially funded and supported by the GRIT Fund, which is a regional regranting program administered by the Contemporary and funded by the Andy Warhol Foundation for the Visual Arts and the Robert W. Deutsch Foundation. And the 2017-18 cycle was partially funded by American University through a faculty research grant, which we are grateful for.
And then we got a surprise grant from the Bell Foundation, which showed up in the mail.
That's so true. Just a check that we opened up, our friend opened up for us and said, "You have money." We're like,
the check had been there for like 2 months. We didn't even know that we got this award. So just to reiterate, as you're experiencing this presentation, we'd like you to really think about how artists' creative research can be incorporated into non-art courses. We teach a complex problems class where our students, unless they get curious, don't know that we're artists. They see that our approach is not the same as the approaches that they see in other classes. Primarily, we set specific goals or requirements for each project, but we don't expect the same outcome from each student. A notable story, earlier we showed you the collaboration we did with Transformer. And Transformer brought Design Studio for Social, what is it, Zoe?
Intervention. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, into our program. And I think he really motivated us to work in the complex problems area because of this plea that he made to our students. He implored art students to use their problem-solving skills outside of their art practices. Mm-hmm. He told them that their skills were necessary, even if they didn't recognize their skills as translating outside of making. He said even a formalist sculptor has skills that he may not realize that he can use outside of his practice.
Mm-hmm. So as you saw, Joyce Scott introduced our project. She was actually one of our first, she and Alana Clark. And by the way, Joyce Scott is a MacArthur Genius. So if you work with the Syndicate project, you might become a MacArthur Genius.
After she worked with us.
After she worked with us.
Just saying.
We paired Joyce with Alana Clark, and we'll show you Alana's video next. And are we gonna play this in its entirety, Tim? Or
I think we should, if everyone doesn't mind. It's a pretty impactful video.
Yeah. And I'm gonna put do you have a way to put the text in the chat? I put the text for the video in the chat, everyone. Oops, hey, Tim, you might have to do that for me.
The text for
Alana's video. It's right underneath the native land section.
Okay, I got it.
Thank you.
Do you know what aesthetic pleasure is? It's joy. It's duality. Disclosing the world and appropriating the unique power to do so. Becoming aware and exercising their radical freedom. Becoming aware and exercising our radical freedom. Becoming aware and exercising our radical freedom. Becoming aware
I'm going to pause the video right here, Tim, just for the sake of time. And I encourage everyone to go to Alana Clark's website and watch this video in its entirety. Alana is from Trinidad and Tobago. She is a Black femme queer individual, and she is intimately interested in finding different ways to convey a very nuanced and challenging relationship with bodies who are unlike her own. We think that we believe this is very important work, and we continue to find ways to show her work to different communities of people, different communities. Oh, you're on mute, Tim.
I had a dog moving. We build programming around our projects inspired by each artist's individual project. So we host syndicate dinners, which Zoe will talk to you about, artist conversations, topical panel discussions, collaborative talks with area art organizations. These are conversations that artists want to engage in, but rarely have the opportunity to engage in. And
Right.
It's one of the more rewarding components of what we do.
Yeah, so the dinner structures there are no more than 8, there are between 8 and 12 people that attend these dinners, and we have a singular conversation. The conversation is around one theme. Everyone receives the same information to prep for it. It's either a reading or something to watch. And we do this so that there is no side talking. No one's allowed to side talk. No one's allowed to have under the table conversations, so that we're very intent. We listen, we talk, when we participate, and it helps folks recognize if they are talking too much or if they speak too little. And it brings ways for people to bring each other into the conversation.
So Zoe is the sergeant of arms and I'm the side talker. So she always has to get me back on. The first time we had a syndicate conversation, we discussed a chapter of called Credit and Debt from Fred Moten and Steve Harney. Their book is called The Undercommons, which we also teach at AU. And of course, after we started teaching their writing, they got a MacArthur grant. And when we did that, and which is something that we routinely do, we invited a professor from Johns Hopkins to moderate that conversation.
Dr. Lester Spence. So we also do a lot of different projects with the artists where we invite people to collaborate with each other. This is Cindy Ching and Chini Celebrado Royer, and this is for project number 3. They have since continued to develop their collaboration, and they profited from their shared work. Cindy Ching won the 2017 Janet and Walter Sondheim Prize, which is a regional grant for $25,000 that's given to the winner. And she also received a Joan Mitchell Foundation Award.
When we started Syndicate, we had a physical location in the Oliver Street Studios in the Greenmont neighborhood in Baltimore. The space was 2 rooms, and it allowed us to bring different artists together in contextual pairings. And the 2 artists were generally from different parts of the country and often at different stages of their careers. We often invite artists that we don't know to work with us. We research artist practice. We find people that we either don't understand or want to know more about. And then we always prepare, as Zoe mentioned earlier, theoretical or philosophical conversations with the artist in some sort of public conversation. These images are by a collaborative couple named Miller and Schellebarger, and their work surprised us because the work that you're seeing is very much what we expected from them, but the outcome of the work we did not expect. They were so interested in strangers approaching them and providing an opportunity that they decided to make the work temporary. So this is very painstaking work. And when the show ended, they did a ceremonial burning with the 4 of us. And now we share the ashes and a promise to both make work from the ashes.
Yeah. Yeah. The Washington Project for the Arts hosted a conversation with these artists, and WPA paid stipends to them. And this is the kind of opportunity making that stems from the work that we do within the program. We want to connect with other organizations to co-host artists for talks, events, and exhibitions.
So this is an image from the second largest syndicate dinner. We had a photographer working with us named Nate Larson, and we put him into conversation with another artist and a community organizer named Joe Orzal, who had an exhibition at the Washington Project for the Arts that was up at the same time as Nate's show. At the WPA dinner, we discussed the politics of representation towards a critical and ethical encounter with others, and Michael North's essay, The Dialect of Modernism, Race, Language, and 20th Century Literature. This conversation included 15 artists, professors, arts administrators, and community organizers. And we talked about representation and the problem of representation, which is basically who gets to talk and who represents who.
Yeah, and so in other syndicate dinners, we've examined Judith Butler's gender trouble, Kimberly Crenshaw's intersectionality, and some of the ideas are familiar to us and some are new. We explore them as a group. Another example is in preparation for our syndicate conversation with Jeannie Sims in 2016, we read Professor Malini Ranganathan's article, Thinking with Flint. We were so excited to find out that she taught at AU. She teaches at AU and leads the ARPC. And so we're so thrilled that we are also now affiliate faculty with the Anti-Racist and Policy Center at AU.
She's become our colleague. So as you will see, Syndicate changes, and it's really an art project between the 2 of us that changes over time. It's really never the same any year. So it started with a specific space, and then now we're actually working in other people's spaces. So Project 8 was our most ambitious project to date, and it coincided with the Baltimore's Artscape Festival. We typically invite 2 artists to do a project, but in the case of this project, we selected 3 artists from the Baltimore, DC region and 4 artists from different parts of the country. We asked 7 painters to not paint. And the outcome really had ramifications. One of the artists, Paulo Arrero, who was a visiting artist at our program this year, credits us with absolutely shifting his practice. This is the work by Leslie Smith III We met him when he was a visiting artist at AU. I moderated a conversation with Leslie and another artist, and I had never met them. So I met them on stage. Zoe made me do it. And we were talking about the politics of abstraction. This conversation was part of the Kinetic series, which was sponsored by a local collector named Dr.
Daryl Atwell.
Daryl Atwell, yeah. And this work with someone who we did not know has expanded. And we've worked with Leslie now 3 times. Oh, I think this is yours.
Oh, yeah. And we have links that we'll provide to everyone. I just saw a note in our chat.
Right. So this was, I think, the second or third time we interacted with Leslie and Rush Baker, who I originally had I moderated a conversation, and then in turn, Zoe moderated a conversation with the 3 of us around abstraction and identity.
Yeah.
We continue to collaborate on a national and international level to connect regional artists with artists and opportunities outside of their immediate community.
Our first international collaboration took the form of a syndicate dinner hosted by another artist initiative called Ray Gun Lab, the Regions, which is a government-funded national art and culture program, and the Mulberry Project, a local social justice initiative in Nabi, Queensland, Australia. And so all of this took place in Australia in 2019, in the spring of 2019. It was literally our largest syndicate dinner to date and involved 30 guests. We discussed belonging, land, and community. Decolonization was the foundation of this rather large yet intimate dinner.
We'd love to talk more about that dinner at some point.
Yeah. So we're led by ideas and not a specific medium, which has resulted in the intermedia transdisciplinary approach to making art and the Syndicate Project. So Constructions of Self and Other is a class that we developed in 2017, and it's a great example of how this way of thinking has manifested in our teaching. Using an interdisciplinary and intermedia approach, understanding constructions of the self and other introduces students to the ways that people shape their identities across a variety of cultural perspectives and media platforms. So in this particular project called I Thought You'd Be, we read Louise Linton, the wife of the current, an article about Louise Linton, the wife of the former Treasurer Secretary, and the impact that social media had on the public's perception of her.
This is another project, and this one is about businesses. We had students do work around geolocation. We had students do work around self-tracking and neoliberalism. Well, I'm sorry.
And health apps.
And health apps, yeah. We have, and this is our final project, where students got to look at one of their favorite businesses and consider the business's mission and values. And they talked about how these businesses did or did not meet these values. They asked how these companies use social media. Are they being contradictory or misleading? What are these businesses promising, and what are their obligations as businesses to their stated missions? Who are they serving? I get to hear about all sorts of business practices. The students get to meet each other in a really unusual way, which is essentially through their favorite businesses. Or some are well-known, some are not well-known. But we really get to learn a lot about what we value and what the people around us value.
And how our identities are even reflected and also influenced by these companies.
We often bring students into our projects. This is are you gonna play this, Zoe?
I'll play a little bit of it.
This is a project by a recent graduate that was included in Why of the Why Not.
Please be seated. Raise your right hand.
I'll just play a little bit of that.
It's very worth following up on. It was included in an online exhibition hosted by the the Baltimore Museum of Art in Baltimore, and included Lizzie Alarcon, who was one of our recent alums, We also recently brought a student to Australia with a project called An Idea Maybe. So we have a lot of fun naming our projects, and we really like to spread it around.
Yeah, and that was with Brian McGinnis, who graduated a couple of years ago. And so that was,
Please be seated. Raise your.
Just a minute. This is Amanda Hayes, who graduated a couple of years ago as well. We included her in an exhibition called Abstraction We Thinks, and we're looking at the ways that artists use abstraction to explore the contradictory nature of the genre itself. And then we also work through different kinds of curatorial projects in the area. And we included Guy Miller and Jean Kim, both who have really substantial regional careers, which is really exciting for us to see, in an exhibition called Deep Flash on Art and Transformation. And that was at Biz Arts in Rockville, Maryland.
This is Carrie Francis, who graduated, 4 years ago? And she participated in a performance program that was organized for the Washington Project for the Arts Gala called Fool's Gold. Are we playing a bit of this?
We're not going to play a little bit of this.
Okay.
Do you think we should?
I love this.
I know, I do too. Okay, hold on. We'll play a tiny bit of it. So I know that most of you have been at a bus stop or in line somewhere waiting, and you have your earphones on and you just find yourself moving to the music and lip syncing. That's what Carrie is doing. And it's really a wonderful way that she talks about self-expression and how we get involved and invested in our interior world regardless of what's happening outside of us. Carrie is still in the area and does so much work as a painter, as a community organizer, as a performance artist, and we were really excited to include her in this performance. We've hosted different kinds of syndicate dinners where we've talked about different kinds of really challenging, I think, work and essays. The last time we were in our space, we looked at Rena Gossett and Grace Dunham's transcript of their talk at Williams College called Touch One Another. And it's about the afterlife of anti-cross-dressing and anti-touch laws, embarrassment, and friendship.
And that was with A. Priston Mint, who was one of our artists who did a project, I think, 2 years ago?
Yeah.
And talked with all of our grad students. And we're showing this because of the importance of, we're talking about working in and out, and we also understand that our own students need opportunities.
Exactly. Okay. So we're just going to quickly move through some of our work and how our own work has been influenced by the Syndicate Project. This is a large-scale mosaic that is at one of the anchor pieces at the Eaton Hotel in downtown DC. And this is one of my pieces. It's called Declared and Proclaimed the Black Settlers' Homecoming. And this is a sculptural work called Sib and Rendition. It's about an attempt to make a replica. It's about duplicating a body that, because of the conditions of hand, chance, process, and opportunity, the genetic, if you will, coding generates variations that result in individuality. And this is a house that I built with other artists in San Antonio, Texas. And it was originally commissioned by Art Pace in San Antonio. And it's a half-scale replica of my grandmother's home built from memory and turned upside down, which exposes model train houses on the interior. And I show this image because so that you understand the size of it.
This is some abstract paintings. Zoe mentioned that I make abstract paintings, and these relate to my figurative works, and that they're all about clothing as signifier. I'm not going to really go too far on this. You can go to the next one, Zoe. Zoe forced me to make videos for a project that we had. And this is a series of those. This is called #StraightActing. I did this in collaboration with two people that had been my models for a long time when we reversed roles, and I was the subject and they made me the, they made things around me. I had no voice here. I just had to act.
They make me laugh.
I have to say it was really a challenge. And then this is one of my abstract paintings turned into an object. And the interesting thing about this is
A
this,
large object.
yeah, very, very large object. And what's happening with this is a building that's, it's a piece of brutalist architecture that was kind of unforgiving. And the city of Crystal City decided to cover these to try to lure, I didn't know this at the time, Amazon into the city. And this will eventually be built into an apartment building, which will host retail on the bottom floor. And essentially what I was doing with these is riffing on clothing as commodity. So this is a fancy bag. And I also made another building wrap that was a pair of socks. So I was actually riffing on the things that would eventually land in those buildings.
So we're not going to talk about too much of this, but this is a part of, these are some of the artworks in our collaborative collection, our shared collection. But we wanted to just give you some things to take away so that you can continue to follow us. We have an exhibition that's up right now through the BMA called The Why of the Why Not. It is online. Please check it out. And for our grad students that are on this Zoom, you could see Lizzie Alarcon's work. We also have an exhibition up right now at the Greater Reston Art Center called An Excellent Thought About a Quality Idea. It's on view for the next month and a half, so please check that out and please sign up to receive their notices about the upcoming artist talks with the participants. And we want to also let you know about this.
Yeah, this is our first editing project, and this will come out in next year in November, no, this year in November. And this is a book of 31 essays by artists about, it's working artists, 3 different categories. Zoe, I don't think we have time to really go into this.
We don't, but you know what? We have 3 categories of artists. We have artists that are in academic institutions that have pedagogical initiatives outside of it. We have artists that are within the university system that are doing really innovative work. And then there are artists that aren't attached to any kind of academic institution.
And those are purely pedagogical projects that are meant to operate outside of a university structure.
Exactly. And we hope that you keep up with us so that we can share this book when it comes out. This is a list of the 31 contributors. And we also want to let you know that we will be sending everyone a folder, a link to a Google folder with resources that we use for our classes, as well as some notes and some links to readings that we include all the time. And we include in different packets and a PDF about what we do with at the Syndicate Project.
And I think we have 10 minutes for questions.
Oh, I don't think we have any minutes.
Oh, we have 0 minutes for questions? All right, well, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks y'all. It's great to talk with you. And please definitely email us anytime.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Nice to see you all.
Nice to see you both. Take good care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zim.